I don't like when people lie to me. I don't like when people like aren't like genuine with me. So I try to give that to the people that I'm working with, where I would rather just broach the subject and talk about it like humans and see what we can figure out.
What's good, everybody? Scoobert Dubert here. Just had a great conversation with Ben Rice, a Brooklyn-born producer and mixer. Runs his own studio, Degraw Sound, since 2012. It's a studio in Gowanus. He's worked with just incredible acts like Valerie June, where he got Americana Producer of the Year nomination for that. The National, Joan Osborne, goes on and on and on. He came up in the early 2000s with the New York indie rock scene. He was mentored by Eddie Kramer, and he's one of the coolest producers in the city. Love this conversation, and it's so cool talking to him because it's so chill. I probably should have brought even less energy in here, but in a good way. He has an intensity, but a calming presence that maybe I could learn a little bit more from him and adopt that into my world. Before we get into that really nice conversation, DistroKid makes music distribution fun and easy with unlimited uploads, and artists keep 100% of royalties and earnings. You can join onto DistroKid with a 30% off coupon from Love Music More. Go to distrokid.com/VIP/Love Music More, all one word, to sign up today. 1 million plus artists rely on DistroKid to get their music onto Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, TikTok, Tidal, Instagram, and all of the other major streaming services. Get on it today. Enjoy the conversation. What's good, everybody? Welcome back to Love Music More. I am Scoobert Dubert, joined with Ben Rice. How's it going, Ben?
Hey guys, hey man, going really well. Winding down my day here and excited to chat with you.
Well, you have an obviously beautiful space behind you for those that are watching on video right now. Where are you located right now?
So I'm in Brooklyn. I'm based out of a studio called Degraw Sound. It's been my spot now for 14 years. And, it's crazy to think about how quickly it goes. It's still, I walk in here and it still feels like a brand new thing to me. But, 14 years goes pretty quick.
It's incredible. And also 14 years of being in the musical scene and talking about indie rock bands. The thing that I want to dive into right at the beginning is this notion of the fifth band member, the fifth Beatle, the role of the producer, and also the nurturing role of the producer of especially when you're integrating a band that maybe has played a lot of shows or has got a little bit of buzz or following, might be their first time in the studio. Super curious to kind of learn more about how you view that role and kind of that pressure and privilege that kind of comes with it.
Yeah. Well, my background was playing in bands. Growing up, I grew up in Brooklyn and, played in bands in the early 2000s. And I remember when we started working with producers and just, they would show up at our rehearsal space and, they would be very patient with us while we tried to figure things out. But there was one producer who I worked with early on, Gus Van Gogh, who still is making records. I think he worked with the Beaches recently and Metric, and he's just, an amazing producer and creative, human being. But he was so nurturing to us and to me personally, and just took the time to really just be there. And it was one of those things early on in my career where he kind of identified for me, it was I see you like a lot of different kinds of music. I see that you like writing songs. It's you might consider doing this production thing besides being in a band. And then friends bands would start asking me, they're like, why do your songs work and our songs don't work? And I was like, well, because we have a producer and he workshops this stuff with us, and we're working on the arrangement, we're exploring these ideas. I feel like a lot of what I do just goes back to what I experienced in a positive way from being in a band, and then kind of having essentially a couple decades now of doing it, in my own way, and kind of figuring out how do I find the best ways to communicate, with the different people and different personalities and bands.
I'm super curious about that because it does seem like there is, there's a chain of apprenticeship. It's almost kind of like coaches become players, become coaches. Knowing a playbook that worked for you in that space, it makes it so much easier, I think, to put yourself in a new band's shoes.
100%. And, like I remember what it felt like. Like I remember what it felt like to like go in and have to be vulnerable and share a song, and you're there with like your friends and you know, your bandmates, and you don't want to look bad in front of them, and you don't want that, they feel the same way. So also, being there as a producer now, it's like finding ways to like create the space for everybody in the band to feel like they can just share ideas and that we try everything. I read a book by Phil Jackson,
Oh, cool.
who's,
Yeah. Love, yeah. Zen
basketball
master.
coach. Yeah. And it was one of those things where like it put together a lot of the things that I felt that I was doing like naturally,
Hmm.
from being in bands and then from like working with bands. And I think he does a really great job of just like articulating these thoughts as far as like how do you build a team and how do you create, a space where everybody can be themselves. Right. He wasn't treating, I'm not a basketball aficionado by any stretch of the imagination, but he wasn't treating Dennis Rodman the way he was treating, Pippen or, Jordan. And I think that when you're working with a team of people, everybody's different. Everybody needs different things, but everybody needs to have a voice, and everybody needs to feel welcome and feel like they can be the best version of themselves. So I think that's super important when you have a band. It's like, you've got the lead singer, but the lead singer is their best when everybody else in the band is contributing and able to feel comfortable to show up and share.
I actually really like basketball as an analogy because it's a 5-person sport, just like a lot of
Yes.
bands are like 4 or 5 people. And everyone has a huge role because it goes offense to defense. So everybody has to be kind of not the weak link, or you need to protect against each other's weaknesses with each other's strengths. And there's that flow, there's that energy where it's mental, but you're also having to react in real time, just like with music, where like, yeah, you can practice something forever, or you can think through the nuances of what you want to do in your solo or how you want the drum beat to like look or be shaped on the grid. But ultimately, it comes down to like, how do your limbs work? How do you feel that day? Like, what does your gear pull out of you? So that's actually a really cool analogy. I like it.
Baseball's my sport.
Yeah,
Like,
nice.
I grew up as like a baseball fan, but I think that, like you said, like the way that a basketball team has to move together and play together, and Phil Jackson talks about this. He's a massive music fan, and just like the rhythm of the game, I think that there's a lot of parallels. And it was also like this. He talks about it in his book, and not like, obviously the podcast doesn't have to be like the Phil Jackson podcast, but it was just so profound to like see those similarities, and especially with like the team side of what a band is versus working with a solo artist. Although of course there's the overlap because you wind up being their team and their band as a
Mm,
producer.
yeah.
But he talks about this idea that like when the team shows up, that when they step onto the court, that they're trusting him as their coach, and they're putting their trust and faith in him. And I think that as producers, like any artist that chooses to work with you as a producer, they're putting so much trust and so much faith in you.
Yeah.
And it's this massive moment in their lives where they've written these songs or they're writing these songs, and they're looking for, somebody who can help them get it across the finish line. But they're looking for a space where they can realize it to the way that they're like dreaming it, right?
Yeah.
And oftentimes they only get one chance to do that. So anytime that like a band shows up or an artist shows up for you as a producer, I feel like it's like also this, you're showing up for them
Mm.
in that same way, where this is their one shot to make this record. You've got to be as present as what you're asking them to be.
That's beautiful. How do you set the stage, like the scene? Like, what is your first impression? How do you welcome people into the studio? Like, obviously, you have a great energy, and I already feel my blood pressure lowering from its typical high
Oh,
pitch. Talking to you,
thanks,
but like,
man.
how do you welcome people in?
I mean, I like to go see bands. I
Mm,
I love to like go see the band play,
yeah, cool.
or solo artists if they have a show, and it's remotely close by to where I am. I'll travel to go see them, because I think that you learn so much from just seeing like somebody's performance and hearing them and going to rehearsals. Like I think that there's a lot of things that you can do before you get in the studio, have conversations with them so that the minute that they show up, it's not like, okay, game time. A lot of times, New York City's kind of become a destination. There's still a great music scene here,
Mhm.
or so I'm told. Um, there definitely is still a music scene here, but it's also this destination, right? In the same way that Nashville and LA
Yeah.
and London are.
Yep.
So a lot of the projects that I do are people who are traveling and they're like, I want to go to New York City and make a record.
Okay.
So I always try to like make sure that we have time together and that, when possible, that like the first time that we're getting in a room, it's not just like, oh, hit record. Or if it's going to be like the same day, you always want to like have a couple hours to hang and have coffee and, you know, have these kind of conversations.
Absolutely. And just to like, yeah, set the context and set the what you're going for. So much of it, I think there can be a lot of pressure, especially if you're like working remotely with somebody or whatever, to be like, here's the perfect reference, or here's what I'm trying to go for in like really detailed words. But so much of it is almost communicated by vibe and body language and just being present. And I think, yeah, that's something that has definitely, I think, been missing from a lot of producer conversations.
It's so hard. I mean, I think that especially like over the past, like whatever, 5 or 6 years
Yeah.
since the pandemic, there's been this entire wave where we got really used to like working remotely and having these kind of like Zoom conversations. And we needed to do that because we're creative human beings. Like we love making music and we needed to continue doing that just for our sanity and for like our souls and for like who we are. But I think that the flip side of that is that like now that it's been safe to hang out in person like for a couple of years, it's like we can get back in a room and just I think reminding people that there is this beauty of the unspoken communication that you have when you can just be silent around each other, but you can like read what the other person is sharing just by how they respond, like what their body language is listening back, and I think that that's one of the things that you can get it. I mean, we can get it to a certain extent when we're on a video call, but the silence is a different thing when you're in the room together.
Yeah, I agree. And it's a good point too, I think, with what we're facing in the broader industry with AI and the pressures and all that kind of stuff, to be able to go the opposite direction and get more human and more physical when so
Yeah.
much other stuff is shifting digital. It just makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I mean, you know, AI is its own,
Yeah,
its,
I know, totally. You
its
talk
own
about that.
can of worms.
I know.
And I mean, I don't have the answer. I don't know if
Yeah,
anybody does, but
no.
I mean, I think that there's definitely a place for it, but I also think, for me, it just comes back to like, why did I want to make music in the first place? And just tying into like the theme and the name of the podcast, it's like, I love making music. So that's why I wake up in the morning. I wake up in the morning because I'm like, I want another opportunity to make music. I don't want to give that to AI.
Yeah.
It's nothing, nothing against AI. If somebody
Hmm.
wants to, do it with AI, do it with AI. If that's what gets you going. But I love the process of being, with other creative, human beings making stuff. It's just the best feeling.
I think that's actually something interesting to talk about too, is like the process, like what
Mm,
those steps actually look like and how they can change. And I think that, yeah, the journey versus destination thing with records sometimes gets blended, but my favorite producers, they talk almost exclusively about the journey. Like
yeah.
obviously they're progressing towards having a releasable record, but it's so funny about how I don't know, the conversations that I hear, it just seem like they're dominated with like, how do we how do we really focus on being present and moving together and exploring different places?
I mean, I think about that a lot. The producers and the record makers that need the mixers too, who seem to like make the music and the art that really speaks to me the most. I think have cracked the code on like how to really be present. And I remember like one of my favorite bands like growing up was a band called The Verve,
Yeah,
and
totally. Hmm.
Bittersweet Symphony
Right.
was like the kind of breakthrough. But they have, I mean, if you haven't listened, I highly recommend listening to the whole catalog because there's so much there. But my point in bringing them up is I remember that there was like an interview with the singer Richard Ashcroft, and he was talking about like they had won like maybe like a Brit Award or something, and he was like, it's not about like winning the awards, it's about the completion and the process. And I remember being, probably like whatever, 14 or 15, and it's like one of those things that like sounds really cool when somebody says it. So like as a teenager, like it like clicks, even though like I had no idea what it meant. There was something about that where I was just like, whoa, that sounds like a really cool thing to say. Like that guy must be the man. And, he's made some great art, but it's only through making records for a couple of decades now that I'm like, man, like that really is it. It's the completion of the process. It's the fact that we get to be here and create these moments and these memories with each other. And then on a certain level, like the records for us, on a certain level, like the records for like the listener, on a certain level, it's like for maybe the universe or whatever spirituality like you feel. But the only thing that we have control over is like if we're present while we're making it, and if we're present with the other person and people that we're making it with. So I think that like, to the best of my ability, I try to just kind of slow things down and really be there.
That's beautiful. I actually want to ask you now on the exact opposite, the Chinese democracy question. How do you keep
Okay.
things moving? So like it's one thing to be very present and in the process and give the record the time, but how do you also give it the pace and intensity so that you don't like just get caught in whirlpools?
Well, I mean, we're working with indie budgets.
There you go. Yeah, yeah.
So,
Yeah, sorry.
so it kind of solves itself. No,
Yeah.
I mean, like I think that definitely factors into it.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I really believe in is just having like open and honest conversations like throughout the process of making records and with everybody that I collaborate with. So I think that like before I started working with like really good producers, like as a musician coming up, I definitely had the experience of being in situations where I felt like we were being rushed, and we were being rushed because somebody wasn't comfortable having the awkward or perhaps like difficult conversation of saying, "Hey guys, we're falling behind schedule here." And I think that like when you're working with an artist, you've got to have the openness where you can say to them, "Hey, we're falling behind schedule here," and then see how they feel about that. Because sometimes the answer is, okay, we all acknowledge it. It's no longer this elephant in the living room, and we can still like we just recalibrate
Yeah.
and we can pick up the pace naturally without feeling rushed, right? Or sometimes you say, you know what, like we're finding something that we didn't think we were going to find. We
Mm.
need to extend this.
Yep.
And both can be totally legitimate. I think it's only like when you get into like the fear-based thing of like being like rushed, of like trying to like, oh, we're going to like speed through that idea. Oh, it's good enough. And it's just like
Yeah.
anytime you do that, you just create problems, and I think that you really jeopardize the trust that you can establish as a collaborator. And for me, I feel like I'm so sensitive to that where like I don't like when people lie to me. I don't like when people like aren't like genuine with me. So I try to give that to the people that I'm working with, where I would rather just broach the subject and talk about it like humans and see what we can figure out.
Yeah. No, it's great. And I agree that position of honesty. There's also an interesting thing that like inspiration can create its own pace or its own
Hmm.
like well of energy. You think you're dragging, it's towards the end of the night, you feel like you're going to call a session, and then somebody has an idea and you're like, whew, shot of caffeine basically.
Totally. Totally. I mean, I was working on a session today where like the artist showed up and they wrote something yesterday and felt really good at about it, and they came in today and they said, "Oh no, that just feels sleepy. I've got to rewrite like all the verses." And I said, "Okay, great. Like let's hear it." And they rewrote like the verses, something that we spent 4 hours on yesterday. They redid in an hour,
Mm,
and it wound up being so much better. And their instinct was right.
yeah.
And I think that like one of the things that sometimes we don't realize is how important iterating is, right?
Yeah.
Like when I listen to my favorite records, I'm hearing like the final product of like, months, maybe years of like
Yes.
iterating. I didn't hear like all of the steps like going there, right? And I think that when we're making records for ourselves, it's like being kind enough to, ourselves as producers and mixers, and also giving the artist space to say, yeah, we've got to iterate. We've got to go through a lot of different versions in order to get to that thing that really feels magic.
It's a great point too, because I remember when I was first learning how to mix and I was comparing my mixes to masters,
Oh
and like a
yeah.
mix one or a mix zero to a master and be like, why am I so bad? It's like, well, it's not exactly apples to apples. You got to figure out limiting. You got to bring the volume up. Now you get a little bit closer. Now you can kind of understand, and then maybe mix 2 or 3, especially when you're, newer at it. The mix 1 usually sucks pretty bad because you need to like step away and come back to it. You don't have those like battle scars or instincts kind of worn in yet. And finding that out really helped me like have, I don't know, the guts to continue.
I mean, when I'm doing like a mix, I'll do 20 or 30 versions as my first mix.
Wow, cool.
And it's
Yeah.
not necessarily because I'm spending days on it. It's just
Yeah.
because like I'm working and I'm saving.
Yeah.
So like
Uh-huh.
if you see like if you were to see like my like file architecture, it would be like sometimes the thing that I'm sending out is like mix like 1-28. And somebody's
Yeah.
like, wait, it's not January 28th. I'm like, no, I know it's not January 28th, but like there were 28 moments in this where I was like, this might be something that I need to come back to because there's something that feels like really good emotionally here, and I'm going to save that, but I'm going to keep going.
Yeah, cool. How often do you loop back, or are you like importing things from older sessions into newer sessions? Like how do you end up using that putty? Or is it usually just like waypoints that you fully revert to?
Could be either,
Cool.
really. I
Yeah.
mean, I think it depends on how much I lose the plot.
Okay. Yeah. That's cool.
I think I feel like I'm in a good place now. Like my feeling about mixing is this, where like there are moments where I'm like really, really happy with like how things are feeling, and I'm just like in general that I'm like what's coming through the speakers feels the way I want it to feel emotionally. And then there are times in my life where I'm just like, oh my God, what like why can't I get it? Like why can't I crack the code? And I feel like, I've just been working really, really diligently at it for a number of years, and it still takes me time, and I still am really, really critical. But I think that the more that I can like zoom out and just be like the little kid, 16-year-old me and be like, does this make me feel?
Curious about your kind of listening setup as you're mixing. I see multiple speakers there. Are you flipping back and forth? Do you go in and out of headphones? What are the ways that you kind of pull that out or see if it's hitting you in different circumstances?
So I came up on NS10s. I love NS10s. Like I feel like I just, till the day I die, I'm gonna want a pair of NS10s around. I don't like headphones. I just like, I don't know, for whatever reason, there's something about it that for me, like I like the feeling of how the music is moving in a space. I got, I'm a couple of years into working on the ATCs, and that was quite a game changer for me because they just tell you so much. And the speakers are a lens, and whatever speakers you have, I mean, I've mixed on all sorts of different speakers. Whatever you have, if you know what the lens is telling you, it can give you really, really good intel. The thing about having good speakers is that it gives you that information quicker because technically the way that it's moved, the way that the cones are moving is just it's it's giving you better information, right? But I think that like most of the time now I'm working on the ATCs. I listen on the NS10s. I like to listen in mono. I still am checking in mono, thinking about like how does it like come down, especially on the NS10s. And then like if I'm doing a record, one of my favorite things to do is I'll just put in my AirPods and I'll go for a walk around New York and I'll listen to it the way I'm listening to like any record that I'm a fan of. And if there are things that jump out to me where I'm like, I need to bring out my phone and like make a note, and I'm risking my life because that like bothered me so much that I'm like almost getting hit by like a city bike to like write this like, time code 232, like I've got to change. It's like, if it matters like that, then I'll go and fix it. But if I'm just, sometimes you sit in the studio and you're like, there's always something that you can tweak and you just got to like step away.
Really good advice. I love that too, of like the things that break you out of the trance.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are always the best notes.
Yeah. And, I would say I do like the listening in the background quietly,
Yeah.
like if I've been working for a couple hours, try to take a break every 45 minutes or an hour, just give my ears like a little rest. I've got art books around the studio. I love to just like sit and just like look at, you can open to any page and just read a little bit and
Yeah,
like
it's
look at
beautiful.
art. And then in the background, you've got the mix going and the things that jump out to you that pull you out of that I feel like can also be insightful as far as like what you really need to work on.
Agreed, and that's a great point too. And like, I also think it reflects so much of how music is actually listened to and consumed. It's like people are living their lives. It's on. Maybe it's quietly in the background. And if there's a moment where that vocal like jumps out and interrupts their trance, it's like, okay, let's smooth that out. Let's preserve
Yeah.
those beautiful moments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's definitely how I feel.
That's good. It's good. I would love to share a little bit about the speaker world and mono versus stereo for some of the listeners that might not have thought too much about that. That might have just been like somebody go, huh, why does he listen in mono? Or what is it about these NS10s that there is a little bit of apprehension in his voice, as though there is some some people that love NS10s and some people that hate them. Would love to
Yeah.
maybe nerd out a little bit on the speaker side, just in case somebody isn't plugged in there.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I feel like somebody could definitely fact check all of this. And so, please do put it into AI and, see if this is the best way to explain it. But I mean, the NS10s were bookshelf speakers and they kind of became classic studio speakers for a reason because they're pretty mid-rangey. The low end is not always there, right? Like that's one of the things. Sometimes it can be great to pair it with a sub. I have a sub. There were a number of years where I was mixing with NS10s and a sub, and I found that was like a good way to like extend the low end. And I had the crossover on the sub pretty high, maybe around like 300, so that I
Oh
could
wow.
get like really have the overlap of like the low mids with the speaker, so it just felt like continuous as opposed to like these two different zones.
Yeah. Okay.
As far as checking in mono, I think that's one you're checking phase, right? You're checking to see if there's things that you're doing in the stereo field that when you bring the two speakers together, if you're canceling anything and you're looking at, do your reverbs disappear? Do your rooms sound kind of wonky? Sometimes you can lose your low end if you have these like a lot of times we're getting stems and there's a great new plugin that I'm going to get
Yeah.
that is, it like goes through, I forget what it's called, but it like goes through your folders of stems and like splits them out if they're actually mono files. Maybe you
Oh,
know what
cool.
I'm talking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah. No. I don't. It sounds like a good idea though.
It just like showed up for me on Instagram like
Nice.
yesterday. I was like, I've got to get this because it's one of the things like you get stems and you're
Yeah.
like, this is actually a mono file,
Yep.
but it just printed as a stereo file. So the compatibility, and also, when you go out in the world so much, if like something's going to play in a bar and like they've monoed out like their system.
Yeah.
So sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Sometimes you just get half a mix where you're sitting, and sometimes you get like a mono version of the
Small
mix.
tambourine.
Exactly, which I love. I'm a big tambourine fan, but I think it can be helpful to just do that. I've done some mixing work for a gentleman named Jim Sklevunos, who like he's just like a New York City legend, but he plays with Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, and he's like a producer, and he's been like just indie legend. And I remember like working with him and like how much he was just like, you have to listen quietly, you have to listen in mono, and like we would spend like we'd mix a song a day, and it would be like 5 o'clock, and I'd be like, all right, we're getting close, this is feeling really good. And then the revisions would really really start, and we would like flip to mono, and we start like listening really really quietly, and we would just pick apart the entire mix. And sure enough, he was right. When you do that on NS10s and then you open things back up, all of a sudden your mix
Yeah.
is a lot clearer.
Yeah. Makes sense. Makes sense. I mean, especially for like indie rock, where so much of the musical information is like low mid,
Yeah.
like guitars and all that kind of stuff. It's like you really want everybody to be working together. Live drum kits.
Mm,
We've gotten so much into like electronic world, but so much about live drum kits that I love and hate is just how full spectrum they can be. Like I was mixing a kick drum, and it was literally just, it was like that could be a mix on its own. Just looking at the visualizers, like, good lord, I need to make a
yeah.
decision. This is a huge
Yeah.
kick drum.
Yeah. Yeah, and it sounds so good, and then you're like, I
Yeah,
want to preserve. I've got the best kick drum
I
sound
know.
ever. I can't EQ this, and you're like, no, I got to EQ it, or I got to just turn it way down.
Exactly, exactly. No, it forces decisions, but that's what the beauty of
Yeah.
good speakers or forcing uncomfortable situations like mono or quiet or walking around with some ambience. It forces you to address, the things that, I don't know, if you weren't listening carefully or if you were only listening in one environment, might be good enough. Might be something to
Yeah.
glance over.
I hope that was
It
you
was.
got to fact check it with ChatGPT, but
That's my understanding.
that's my best attempt.
So it's either I mean, if everyone agrees in it colloquially, ChatGPT is just going to parrot that back. So for all intents and purposes, we'll just call it true.
Yeah.
Really curious about kind of your work as you were coming up and learning from, just all these great producers. Like we already talked Gus Van Gogh, but like Eddie Kramer, for example, just like
Yeah.
total legend, Jimi Hendrix, Led Zeppelin. Like what did you glean from kind of those mentorship opportunities, and how do you take that forward into 2026?
Man, I mean, so I feel really lucky.
Yeah,
I feel really lucky that
awesome.
I wound up in like those sorts of situations. And a lot of it, I think, for me was just being not afraid to ask. For a little bit of context, my first like job was being a runner in like a big recording studio here in New York City. My music teacher saw that I was like really passionate about music, and he was like, "Let me see if I can get you like an internship." And he did. So even at 16, I was like getting coffee, wrapping cables, getting like microphones. I had no idea what I was doing, but I was doing it and I was around this. So by the time that I was in bands and like we were getting into studios and the majority of people were just like in party mode, I was in like, this is a masterclass mode where like I would just like sit there as quietly as I could and just like watch like every single move that the producers would make, and then at the end of the session ask questions. I mean, I was in a band, we had a record deal, we got out of the record deal, and like I was starting to like produce a record for us, for the band, and Eddie Kramer was doing like one of his like Waves tours where he was like,
Yeah.
here's my new Waves plugins, and I was like, okay, like this is an opportunity to go like see him talk at like Guitar Center. And I just,
Cool.
went, and at the end of the tutorial, people were going up and having him sign stuff, and I got in line and I went up and he said, "What, you don't have anything for me to sign? What do you want me to do, kid?" Basically, and I was just like, "Well, I don't want you to sign anything. I wanted to talk to you and be like, will you mix my band's record?" And he just like stopped and like kind of laughed at me, and he looked and he goes, "Okay." He goes, "Go wait over there." So, like I sat there for like 45 minutes and waited, and then he came over and basically very politely grilled me on how I had recorded it. And he was like, "Okay, sounds like you did the correct thing. Send it to me. Send me like the three best songs. And if I think that there's something, then, we'll talk." So I sent him, 3 tunes, and he called me up a week later and said, "Come out to LA. Let's finish this."
Sorry to interrupt this very important broadcast. What I'm asking for is for you to rate it 5 stars, share it with your friends. This is like the most important thing for this podcast to grow. So if you want to do this, you go onto the podcast screen, right? You click on the ... on Spotify. Under there, it says rate show, and you go and you click it. 5 stars. If you could do that for me, that's the best way for the algorithms, all this stuff, to share it out with the world. I know that it's a lot to ask, but if you could please just hit those 3 dots and then a 5 star, it would really help us out and helps us, get the word out and spread the love of music. So thank you. If you're listening on YouTube, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Thank you so much. And here's the rest of the episode. Cool.
So that was just, it's one of those things where like it's hard, like looking back, like it doesn't even make sense. But when you're a kid, you're not afraid to like ask for these things. And then, you get in the studio and you're just watching like this process, but you're watching it on something that matters to you because it's your band's record. It's not just theoretical. It's not like I was never somebody, like I didn't go to college. Like I learned better from being in it and being with people and being like, just being immersed in that way. So it was just such a great way for me to like have like that kind of like mentorship and like the little like nuggets that you just get from those situations. There's nothing like it.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I mean, I feel the same way when you're watching like a plug-in demo and you listen to the demo song that they pull up and you're like, that's just not what I make, or that's not what I like. Like how do I evaluate this given this
Right.
song? I don't know. It's a good point though. It's so personal.
Right, because like so many of the demos are you're just like, well, I wouldn't listen to this with or without the plugin on it,
Exactly.
so
It's like I,
it doesn't have any emotional impact.
right. It's like I guess the
I'm
saturation sounds good.
Yeah, it sounds more saturated. I
Yeah,
agree.
exactly.
Yeah, but also, I mean, I feel like now like we're kind of in this like golden age of like mix with the masters, like
Yeah,
where
true.
the information that's available to
Yeah,
like the generation of like producers and mixers and artists who are coming up, it's incredible relative to like what was there. I mean, there was like something called like the mixing engineer's handbook that like I had, like I don't know if you
I've seen
know.
the yeah.
uh,
I've read some of it. Yeah,
and like 80% of it to me was just like gobbledygook because I was like I don't know, but then in the back there were like interviews, and it was like those like little interviews that were like that or tape op was
yeah,
the only way to like get access to like how producers and mixers actually thought. So the fact that we have like Mix with the Masters and podcasts, and it's like
yeah.
we're living in this like era where there's just such great information out there. And I guess for me, like, not that I'm anywhere near like on that level as far as like Eddie Kramer, but I always like want to make myself available to, you know, anybody that I can as far as like pass on whatever insight or information that I have, because it's a gift to get it. And it's one of those things where like, you just want to pass it on and see it be useful and see what somebody else can make with it too.
Absolutely. And also, like, I don't know, Eddie Kramer, obviously amazing. But I think that there are just different skill sets throughout the industry, especially for those that are able to get something that is rough or new or like first experience in a recording studio. That is such an underutilized and under talked about skill, because those are just a lot of people that are like making their areas sound or working with up and coming artists. A lot of the biggest mix engineers haven't done that in a long time, or if they do, it's somebody that came to them with like pristine recorded tracks. There are some gaps, I think, in the information space that I
Yeah,
think conversations like this help fill in.
I agree completely.
What do you think about the combination of like tactile versus digital? Like obviously we were talking plugins, clearly both like plugins, but I also see a lot of gear behind you. How do you try to navigate that? How do you like decide whether you're going to do it in the box or do it physically?
Well, I mean, my workflow is pretty hybrid, which I like,
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah. Like,
I think that, the generation, like maybe I'm dating myself, but the generation that I like came up with, like was like right, like it was too late to like have really experienced what it was to like have like big budgets, but like we heard tell of it, and it, like one person removed, where like they were like 2 years ago we would have had like $1 million budget for this project, but like now our budget is like $25,000. And, I came up with double O two, and perfect example, the record that I did that Eddie Kramer, worked with my band to finish, I did that with a double O two and a Mackie. And one of the things that he loved to do, we were in what's the studio in LA, had a beautiful API console. But he would, all the people who would come into the room, he would be like, what preamps did they use to record this? And you know what preamps people guess. They guessed Neve, they guessed API, or they guessed SSL, because like those are the preamps that you would guess. And he would just laugh and lose it. He'd be like, no, they recorded on a Mackie. And I think it's like one of those things where it just goes to show you that you can make great art with whatever tools you have. The deeper that you go down this rabbit hole, the more that you notice like the nuances between the different tools, because that's what they are, right? But like there's the allure of using all of the analog stuff. It's beautiful and it sounds amazing, but I'm also like, if it wasn't for Pro Tools, like I don't know that I'd be here today, man. I
yeah.
mean, Pro
Yeah.
Tools like gave me a life in music. So I'm like, I think about it sometimes. I'm like, man, like if it wasn't for like Pro Tools and a double O two and an iMac,
Right.
like there's no way that I would be here, and I don't even know what I'd be doing with my life. So I love the digital stuff too.
That's a great point too. It's access and it's the ability to work with a lot of different artists. Like I feel like part of those big budgets were tied to like, hey, everyone here is on retainer now. Like you are working
Yes.
on this record.
Yeah.
Versus like smaller budgets, like, hey, like you can't monopolize 100% of my time. Like I'm gonna have other stuff to do. And
Yeah.
Pro Tools allows that to like kind of happen.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that like for the types of projects that I work on, a lot of it is we'll record with like analog gear and get it into the computer. And I'm a big fan of committing, just
Me
like
too.
commitment,
Yep.
whether you're using plugins or you're using soft synths or you're using real synths or, analog synths, shouldn't say real synths. Just commit. If you like the sound, commit to it. That's what it is. And I think that that's a way that, like, with whatever your setup is, maybe you have some guitar pedals and you're plugging those in, just like make that be the sound. And then when you go back to it later, what you're starting with, even if you're staying in the box with your mix, it has that imprint and it has a sonic identity.
Outstanding advice. I couldn't agree more. And I also think that it's one of those weird, like, resource abundance curses where if your machine can handle 35 soft synths all running at the same time, it's like, good for you. You shouldn't be. Make some decisions, print those
Yeah,
things.
yeah,
Like my old computer could not. My old computer
yeah,
would die after like two, and so like I had to make decisions, and I would always be glad that I did. I wouldn't. I would very rarely revert, and so nowadays I do the exact same thing of like I am running a plug-in chain that is clearly producer mind. I am going to make a decision as a producer, just like I would if it was analog gear. And then my mixing brain can make some tweaks. Doesn't mean that it's done forever, but it's like lock in what makes you feel good right now, and then you can always make tweaks later, but not in the ground up kind of way, not in the like, let's change the amp sim, let's put it in a completely different room. It's like separate out those
yeah,
concerns. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
I did a session, I'm blanking on the producer's name. I should know. I think he'd worked with like Chance the Rapper, and this was
Cool.
like maybe this was a while ago. And he came into my studio, and he opened up his session, and there were zero plugins. And
Whoa.
I was just like, dude, like, how did, like, what is going on here? And he's like, man, like, I'm in so many different studios working on so many different things. He was like, I don't know if that's a soft synth or if that's a real synth. He was just like, I just commit at the end of every session. I just commit everything, so it just
Cool.
exists as audio. And I was like, that is like the sickest way to work.
Agreed.
And I just love that, and it's something that I've just kept going as much as I possibly can.
So cool. It also kind of raises the bar of what you're doing here. It's like, hey,
Yeah,
we are not turning back. Let's make this cool.
yeah,
It's only forward.
and I think it also forces everybody to be present,
Yeah.
right? Because it's
Yeah.
like, what do you think? You think it's cool? Everybody feel good about this? Okay, like let's commit to it and let's move forward.
Yeah.
And I also think that as far as like we work in this world where like it's not always the most tangible, and it can be so ambiguous as far as like going back to what we were talking about earlier. It can be so ambiguous, like when we're trying to have conversations about how does it make us feel, what do we think.
Yeah.
And when you commit to something, you're telling everybody, this is what I think. And then the mixing engineer, whether it's you or somebody else down the road, they could say, wow, this is really bright. Like they were crazy. Their ears must have been fried because like there's way too much, like, whatever. But you're telling somebody, this is what I think. I think this should be a bright sound,
Yep.
as opposed to here's a clean DI which has no processing on it. Here's like my plug-in chain, which you may or may not have. And then I also did this alternate. And then there's actually a second alternate because I wasn't sure if I had gone too far on that one. So this is dialed back 30%. And you're just like, well, I don't even know what's going on.
Yes.
I just need one. I just need one that feels right.
Yeah. And then you can always make tweaks, but you're right. Like you give me something crazy bright, I'm not going to make it dark. I'm
Yeah.
not going to go all the way to the other end. Like I might
Yeah.
tame it a little bit, but
Yeah.
you're signaling to me, I want this bright and loud and upfront. It's like, cool. Let's
I
make the
respect
other
that.
things and make it work then. Like frame
Yeah.
it. Like it might be crazy, but like that's how a lot of cool music gets made. Is there's something absolutely bonkers in the mix, and the rest of everybody just kind of accounts for it, and then it's okay.
Yeah. That's absolutely how I think about it.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I also think it kind of pays off what we were talking about at the beginning of the conversation about the Chinese democracy trap of just forever iterating. Is when you start making decisions, it speeds up the process and then it allows for the next chain of decisions to emerge. When you don't make any decisions, that's when you can really get into that whirlpool and then just never really escape the event horizon. You just
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. So true.
Yeah, which I've seen a lot, and I think that's like a big trap and a thing that prevents people from putting themselves out there, or they will get a bunch of different mix engineers if they have the budget to mix something, and then they'll get decision paralysis because they didn't make the decision on like whose vibe fits with this. You can always change your mind later, but like I personally think it's better to like pick a mix engineer, mix with that mix engineer, and then decide, oh, it's not a right fit. Okay, now pick a different one, but like that usually doesn't happen because you usually made the right decision.
I agree. It's like dating.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like at a certain point, you got to make, like, if you want to get to like the next phase, you've got to make a decision.
Yeah.
You've got to make a commitment. And I think great things come out of making commitments. And sometimes the great thing that comes out of making a commitment is realizing that it's the incorrect decision.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
totally valid.
Uh-huh.
But the only way that you can get there is because you made that decision. You're like, oh, wait, time out. Like, I need to go in this direction. And then
Yeah.
you're like, okay, for the next record, maybe I don't hire, somebody who's like insert X and like that's like, they were so involved in like this kind of sound and I feel like they project too much, and then you go in the other direction. And then sometimes you go in for the next record and you go back to the same person. You say, hey, we already have this rapport. We know each other. We've been through this. Let's try it again.
Yeah.
And based on like what we learned from working through this last time, let's start there and then let's recalibrate, because these are some of the things that are really important to me about this project. And like both are valid, but it comes through the commitment.
There's clarity in that commitment. And just like you were saying, like you can always rewrite the verses.
Yeah.
You're in charge. It's like we can get to the mix and be like, hey, this kick drum sounds bad. It sucks to change a kick drum in a mix, but you can.
Yeah. There's a great producer, Brad Cook. Like he did like the Bon Iver stuff, and
Okay.
he's amazing. And I was working at a studio called Sonic Ranch in Texas.
Yeah, I
and
know that.
he was.
This, yeah.
Have you been there?
I've never been there, but I'm familiar. I've watched videos from there.
Dude, it's amazing.
It seems
It's
so cool.
it's a wonderland.
Really? Oh,
Yeah. Man. But he was there working on another project, and I forget exactly how it came up, but one of the great things about that studio is that like whoever you are and whatever you're doing, you're just like crossing paths with these like incredible like music minds, and like you're having breakfast and they're having breakfast. And one of the things that came up in the conversation was just like, oh yeah, like, we'll be mixing, and I always have like a mic set up because you never know when you're gonna have to do a guitar overdub or like punch in a vocal. And it was like one of those things for me at that point where I was just like, oh wow, okay, permission granted. You can make these changes anytime. Like the clay is still wet.
Yeah.
Like you can go back, you can punch in, you can change the lyric. And another one of those things where you're like, okay, the people who are making these like really like emotionally impactful records, they've given themselves that permission.
Yeah, it's really good, and it's an interesting duality. Like there's friction inside of it, or tension inside of this, of like you can give yourself too much permission, then you never finish, or you can give yourself too little permission, and then you dread this thing every time it comes up in the second verse. Or some things only emerge. Like I find this often where, especially if I'm getting tracks from somebody that I had nothing to do with their recording process, and I strip it down, I start to like explore, okay, where does everything sit? You add a little bit more clarity and you go like, there's a huge gap here. Or you send it back to them like, this isn't quite working, and it's because the rough mix or whatever they were working on didn't expose that part of the arrangement. And so like the mix can give that clarity of like what you need to do that you didn't realize you needed to do back when you were working at the rough.
Totally. Yeah, like sometimes things are masked, and then the artist hears it and they have an idea. There was always something that they were searching for, but the fact that you gave them like that new vantage point on like their song, then it's like totally clear to them this missing piece that they couldn't find otherwise.
Yeah, it's really special. It's really special.
Yeah.
I also love sometimes with bands that have a lot of ideas, you'll find like some crazy ideas that in the rough are just completely inaudible. It's like some weird little thing. It's like, that's the coolest part of the song. Let's let that rip.
Yeah. I always feel like I'm like crate digging or like going to like a thrift shop, like when I like, get like sessions like that, and you're just going through like, it's like synth like 1 through 6, and you're like, okay, like somewhere in here, there's going to be something that's totally buried that could just make it. And then you find it and you're like, oh, it becomes this moment. It's funny that you're saying like verse two. Verse two is like always like the example that I give as well.
For
I feel
sure,
like there are
for sure.
two examples that
Uh-huh.
like audio, like, people go to, and it's like using verse two as an example and using snare drum sounds as
Yeah,
examples.
totally, totally. I do both often.
Me too.
Yeah. They're loud moments. Verse 2 is like, okay, why do you want me to do this again?
Yep.
And then the snare drum is like, it's freaking loud and in your face, and or not, but it's
Yeah.
ever present. And yeah, they're good examples.
But I go crate digging for like those like little like sounds or like magic moments that can like help keep the song going for verse two.
Yeah.
And I feel like they often are buried in the rough.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good point. Curious, what do you do with like low end? I know some people are very like carve it all out. If it's not meant to be there, leave the room for the kick and the bass. Do you like leaving it in? What's kind of your take? Vocals, synths, weird things that can have some rumble.
I think it really depends on the genre.
Yeah.
Like I think that it's one of those things where it feels different emotionally when you cut it out than if you leave it. Just in like broad strokes, the options really are you cut it out or you turn it down. Like those are kind of like your two like broad stroke options like when you're confronted with that. And I think that sometimes if you cut too much, that you wind up having it feel maybe too punchy, or you wind up
Okay.
having like a certain amount of like clarity that might not be what the artist is looking for genre wise and feeling wise, because sometimes there's a bit of like the murk and the overlap
Yeah.
that can actually be beneficial emotionally. I mean, one of the things that I think about, and this is like I do this early on in a mix, is I think about like what key the song is in,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
And I think about like what is like my fundamental, like where is my low end going to be?
Okay.
And
Ah.
I think about whether like my bass, or if there's like a synth or a sub synth or a kick drum, like how that stack is going to be, because not to like state the obvious, but like frequency note, right, like that corresponds. So when we're boosting 60 on a pull tech, we're basically boosting a B. So thinking about like who gets like what frequency, and I think about that as far as the architecture of what I'm building. So even if I'm not necessarily going in and cutting it out, I make a decision as far as like, is the bass going to live below the kick or is it going to live above the kick? And I think that for things that move quicker, like a faster paced tempo, I'll often find myself clearing out more space, because the length, if you leave the length, it can slow down your mix. So I think that so much of it is like genre dependent or tempo and key dependent. One other, I mean, nerdy thing, I love like the SSL plugins, the SSL, the 9000. It's Plugin Alliance.
Plugin Alliance? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I love, I mean, it's the SSL thing where you just
Yeah.
go in, you've got like your low end and you've got your top end.
Uh-huh.
And I think that for like when I'm doing like punchier rock stuff, I definitely, I go in and I just get rid of a little bit of low end, and then like I take off the fizz on the top, and you can create a ton of space in your mix that way.
Totally. Yeah, controlling those highs and lows, that makes total sense. And I really love your answer. I thought that was really novel about tempo, like release and like breathing and movement in the mix, and then also fundamentals. Because yeah, often I think people just kind of like low, more, big, but like really thinking about like, yeah, where is that fundamental? What am I boosting? Especially the low frequencies, because everything low trickles up because of the harmonic just nature of hearing and music.
I leave like one of the, what are they called? Like the frequency graphs that like
Yeah.
correspond to the notes, like open,
Yeah.
like on my computer
Cool.
all the time. I know some of them because, you look at the same frequencies, you know your favorite frequencies, but but I find it to be helpful, because then I can just go and I can be like, okay, like, and I should also say this, I'm not always a fan of Pro Q.
Yeah.
I reach for the SSL more. I think that even within that, where you're like not trying to go into like surgery mode, knowing like, okay, I'm going to use this tool, and like even with like a pull tech, since we're using it as an example,
Good example.
like there's like 30 and there's 60 and there's 100, and like those are different notes. So if you're going to have that like on your snare drum, maybe I love it on a snare drum. If you're going to have it
Good
like on a
example.
bass guitar, like that, how those move and like how that extends, it just changes the feel of the music. So thinking about like how that responds to the key and the tempo.
Really good answer. Really, really good answer. So this show is called Love Music More. I like to ask all of my guests one final question. So Ben, why do you love music?
I love music because it's been a companion for me for my whole life. I mean, I like some of my earliest memories are me listening to, music and seeing like the needles go on like my parents like, record player. Like I loved like the Traveling Wilburys stuff and the Beatles stuff. Like that's what I grew up with, and music through all the different phases of my life has just been there, and it's led to so many meaningful experiences. Again, when we're talking about completion of the process, like I've been able to tour, I've been able to work in all these different places around the world thanks to music, and thanks to music being this like companion for me, and every day it reveals something new. So I'm obsessed.
Me too. So,
Yeah.
Ben, where can people get in touch, listen to all of your work, and maybe come out and book you?
Yeah, I have a production website, benriceproductions.com. I'm on Instagram, Ben Rice Music. My studio is called Degraw Sound, and yeah, hit me up. Would love to chat. And if you're ever in Brooklyn, man, come by, say hello. We
Absolutely.
should hang.
I've been meaning to get out because I love Brooklyn so much, and I live in San Diego, so I get up to LA a decent amount, but there is this kind of funny energy of like, man, I'm craving a bigger city every once in a while. San Diego's great. It's just so laid
Yeah,
back and chill, and it's nice. It's a good like home base, but it does not have the same vibe and energy as like you're saying, dodging city bikes, walking through Brooklyn, checking a mix.
yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, anytime, hit me up. We'll
I
do
will.
like the Brooklyn pizza tour.
Hell yeah, you know it.